Now, it's important, the idea of local knowledge is really important here as well. So we talked about the power to define, right? Who has the power to name things? Um, Harding, our standpoint theorist here, argues that those who have that power are the ones who shape the picture of the world, right? If we're going to go back to our factory owner, factory worker model here, right? It would be the factory owner would be the person with the power in that situation to define the world. He defines the world for those who are under him, particularly because they have to look and try to adopt his perspective. So because of this, right, truth is never value free or accessible like in an objective kind of sense. What we mean there is truth always has values embedded in it. There are always winners and losers. There's a certain construction of the world makes the world better for some people and worse for other people. And so it's never like a zero-sum game there. And we can never get to that capital T truth. All the world truth consists of is a bunch, right? Billions of different standpoints that we have from other people. So because of this, we only have partial truth. There's no standpoint that sees everything. There's no standpoint from which we can stand and understand the way the world works. We can understand how the world looks from our particular standpoint. Now, what's important over here is, right, and this is vital to this theory, is that doesn't mean we should stop looking for truth. Just because you're never going to get it doesn't mean that you should give up on that endeavor, because we can still learn more about the world. We can get better truths. We can get more productive ways of seeing the world. But that search has to begin at the bottom of society, because again, those people have adopted the views of those who can see the world the ways from those higher than them as well. They have a better understanding of the way that the world works. But, right, the knowledge gained from that, right, so the knowledge from marginalized group like women is still partial knowledge. That is not some kind of value-free knowledge either. But these are more complete, right? So if you hear the phrase sometimes, if you walk a mile in someone's shoe, then you'll better understand them, right? Well, some of those in the bottom perspective, right, they're able to incorporate, so they can understand how other people look. So they have two standpoints there, for example, right? The factory worker has his or her standpoint and the factory owners. That's two, right? And likely there are other people in that position as well, higher than that person, who they have to understand how the world looks to those people as well. So you might have, like, if you're an assembly line worker, you probably understand how the middle management guy and the factory owner understands you. There you have three understandings of different standpoints. And we're never going to reach that capital T truth, but what we do is we start piecing together this puzzle to get a more complete, or just a better way of understanding the world. This is where we come up with the idea of strong objectivity. Strong objectivity is that objectivity that incorporates different ways of understanding the world. And weak objectivity is the ones that come from powerful groups. Now, there are two reasons for which we should understand that knowledge is better at the bottom than at the top of society, right? And the first is the ones we've been talking there, that marginalized people have more motivation to understand the perspective of the powerful. They have something to gain by understanding how they work, because you can't put food on the table if you don't. But the second is that the marginalized people have little reason to defend the status quo. So if you ask a factory owner how the world looks, he or she will give you a perspective that is going to validate and keep things the way that they are. You do not want to rock the status quo. You're going to get the quote-unquote company line when you get that, right? Whereas people on the bottom have no reason to defend the status quo. What they have is reasons to try to see things the way that they are. So a couple questions about this theory. First of all, do you think marginalized groups share solidarity, or are they just as different as the rest of the population? This theory says that, right, the more marginalized a group is, the more unified they're going to be in how it is that they actually see the world. Do you think strong objectivity is a contradiction? Right, like, it seems kind of out of left field for this theory to start saying we should be concerned about objectivity at all. Is objectivity something you think we should strive for? This is a really important question, right? Is that because we argue that those who are lower on the status, on society's status, who are more marginalized, have a better way of understanding the world. Well, how do we determine, right? There are all kinds of marginalized groups. Some races are marginalized. Some socioeconomic statuses are marginalized. Genders might be marginalized. Sexualities may be marginalized. How do we know who's at the bottom, right? Who's the best at understanding the way that the world works? And it is some kind of ranking system of marginalization seems a little bit crass, and you're likely not get anyone to agree with that. So how do we possibly know? How do we rank and say, hey, these people are oppressed and these aren't as much? The other critique that gets leveled against this theory is that, right, so we say the marginalized people don't have as incentive to keep the status quo, but don't they have just as much incentive to their own version of truth as those in power? They want to rock the status quo as much as those who are higher up want to preserve the status quo. So put it through our critique, a new understanding of people. Absolutely, this is radical. This theory is a few decades old, but it's at the time it came out, it was very novel. Clarification of value, very high on that, right? Right up front, we're saying we're trying to make the world a better place for women, and we're not interested in some kind of big T truth. We're interested in little T truth. Aesthetic appeal? I don't know. Often this is a theory that students are really split on. Half the class always seems to really like it, and half the class seems to really hate it. And so put that through your own critique, maybe depending on which side you are for aesthetic appeal. Discussion and community of agreement. Well, right, there may not always be agreement, but this is a theory that always gets people talking. This is one of those, whenever I do a lecture on this, I never have to worry, because I know there'll be live and vigorous debate after class on it. And reform of society. I think it's pushed the dialogue in the right direction, starting to talk about marginalized groups, and it certainly seeks out to try to reform society. But all right, so we got one gender theory left, and that's that. I'll see you all next time.